to let everybody get onto the webinar. All right, it looks like we got people already.
Hey, Emma, we can't hear you too good.
Press
there you go. You're in and out. Check your connection.
I'm gonna real quick make sure that I am on my headset.
Okay. Hey, Tony, we have you in as a presenter, so just make your microphone is off.
I'm gonna. Oh yeah, when you'll need to unmute yourself here just a little bit. I'm gonna.
Hey, Emma, check your connection. You're in and out.
I am. I'm not sure how
Yep.
that's possible.
There you are.
You can hear me now?
You're still in and out.
Which one am I on?
Third tab is the E1.
Okay.
No.
Okay. Unmute. Oh. Is it better?
Little.
Okay. Well, we're gonna try and see how this works. I'm gonna get started.
Yeah. You only have a little bit in the beginning, so.
Exactly. All right. So, all right, guys. Welcome everybody to our webinar Wednesday, the first one of 2021. We're hoping this year much better than last year. We have a great topic for you today. I know a lot of you have been talking about and worrying about lumber issues. So today we're going to be talking about if your profits are actually in a dumpster and how you can minimize lumber waste. We have Ed and Dave Burleigh who will be our presenters today. But before we get started, I do have a few housekeeping items that I want to cover with you. We are recording this session, so you can log in to our website at www.builderpartnerships.com/events and go to our webinars, and you will be able to watch this recording again this afternoon. We are going to be taking questions throughout the webinar, so be sure to ask questions. We normally do reserve those to the end. Sometimes then we'll stop and ask if there's and if that. But do expect that your questions will be answered at the end of the webinar. We will be closing about 45 minutes in. We cover all of those questions. Always encourage your comments and suggestions. So if you have questions about our webinar series, please give me send me an email, and I'm happy to help you out with that. Let's see. Here's our two presenters. We have Ed Hauck, who's a senior consultant with Builder Partnerships and Shinn Consulting. He is a specialist in this area and working very closely with Dave Burleigh from BIMaire. He is part of estimating over there, and actually a unit price management UPM. So this is going to be a great webinar for you guys to attend, and hopefully you get a lot out of it. With that, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Ed and Dave. Take it away, guys.
So I don't know if everybody else can hear Emma Jane. She was a little bit in and out. I saw the attendee list, and I know almost everybody on there. So I'm glad you guys are attending. I just want to just reintroduce Dave a little bit. He and I met a couple years ago at the Home Builder Show. We spent the entire Home Builder Show with the booth together, and we got to know each other there. And then most recently, we've been working with Dave with several builders, trying to, Dave's got a really good program, and I'll let him talk about that. But what we're doing is actually getting automated takeoff through BIMaire. Like I said, I'll let Dave talk about that a little bit, more. But we've been working with several clients, going through and getting not only the detailed estimates, but we're also starting to just tell the framers and how we want these things framed. I have a couple slides coming up. where the framers are kind of making their own judgment calls. And there's a few of you guys that are on the seminar that actually are doing what we call bid management, where the lumber company is controlling the material, and the framers trying to control the use. And what's happening right now is lumber is so high, we can't control the lumber market. We're doing the best we can bidding out, but the lumber market is where the lumber market is. Our only area that we have control over is take control over the lumber usage and dictate the framer what we're going to do. Right now, I just called two national companies last week in preparation for this. You're approaching almost $9 for a 2x4 9-foot stud. That's crazy. And as we get into this, you start thinking about how much money we're leaving on the table. So as Emma Jane said, we're going to try and get through this in 45 minutes and leave some time at the end for questions and answers. This is a serious subject right now. I still build back home, and literally a $25,000 lumber package a year ago is now, over 40,000. It's serious. So like I said, and all we can do is control it. So before I get into it, Dave, why don't you tell us a little about yourself, the software, and how you're using it?
Yeah, so my name is Dave Burleigh. I'm Director of Estimating for BIMaire. Came from quite a few large national home builders where I was introduced to UPM purchasing or unit price measurement purchasing, where instead of doing lump sum bids or turnkey, we broke everything down into individual parts and pieces so that we could really control our cost down to the micro level. Joined BIMaire about 3.5 years ago to start up the estimating division based here in Salt Lake. And over the past 3.5 years, we've gravitated towards PlanSwift as our estimating platform that we use. We have a highly customized version of it that runs through our own proprietary material manager that then manages all those assemblies for us so that we can quickly trace out a house, let it hit the assemblies and quantify everything down to the level that we need. Like Ed said, he and I a couple months ago started talking about the need to really reinvent framing and find a more controllable way to manage our lumber on site. So we got together, developed a new system, finding that what was missing in the old ways is we could produce really tight numbers, but there was nothing to pass off to the framer to say, this is how you need to frame this home in order for that material list to make sense. So here over about the past 60 days or so, we've really dug into that process as well to line out kind of universal wall details that can be used so that we can still use as little material as possible, but also make sure that we had framework for the framer to know how to utilize that tighter list.
So that being said, what Dave and I kind of started talking about was kind of like a good, better, best kind of philosophy on framing with what's going on now. So I'm working with a couple of builders right now. We're doing some old school, I don't like the word value engineering. We're doing some analysis, trying to figure out what's the best possible way to start, tackling this. So all the rules of thumb that we had for years are all gone because lumber is just so crazy. So what we're going to talk about is monetizing the waste, number one. And actually, I have a couple of examples. Then the rest of the seminar or webinar, I want to, Dave and I kind of talked about this yesterday. We had a great session last week working with a couple of builders. I'm going to let Dave go through what we were doing last week. And I'm just going to do the commentary, questions and answers, and kind of show you what we're doing. So next slide, please, Emma Jane. So by the way, so if anybody don't know how this works, I'm in Pennsylvania, Emma Jane's in Denver, Dave's in Utah, and right now only one of us can control it, and Emma Jane is the smart and organized one, so she's got the controls, and we'll eventually hand it off to Dave. So what I want to just talk about is how much does the waste cost the operation, what are the annualized kind of savings. So Emma Jane, go right to the meat of it. I have a picture of a builder, and this is only one dumpster, by the way. This was a builder that we did some work with for a while. This is literally one dumpster. There were 3 dumpsters on site. By today's standards, I'm guessing these dumpsters had a couple $1,000s worth of money in it. The builder really didn't know how to frame, really didn't want to take an active involvement with the framers on what they were doing, how they were doing it. There were mistakes all over the place. And we worked with them for a while trying to get this together. Next slide, please, Emma Jane. The next one is another builder that we were doing work with. And this is only a 2,200 square foot house, by the way. This 2,200 square foot house, every single window had double studs and double jacks, every single one. The twins were supposed to have double jacks, but had double studs, double jacks. So the reason why I'm showing you this is over the course of those 20 houses, 20 windows in the house times 100 houses a year. Emma J, next slide, please. What I did is I wanted to monetize what this was costing, and how we found it out is we were doing the variance analysis, and every house was over, usually about 150 studs. This is only a 2,200 square foot house, by the way. So how are we off 150 studs plus? So what it came down to is double studs, double jacks. That's 4 extra per window. That's 80 studs per house, and in today's dollars, that's $8.73 a window. Okay, times that. Up, it's almost $700 a house. This builder was a little bit over 100 homes a year. They're literally letting $70,000 a year go out because the framer framed it his way. So a lot of this came down to education with the framer, trying to explain to him that it's actually easier and faster for him to do it this way, and educating the field team on what's the exact detail. So what happened is the detail that they had was for a 6-foot window. Right next to it was a single 3.0 window. They just missed it. The next example after that, same builder, next slide, Emma Jane, please. Same identical builder, okay? What we were doing was going through this house. They had also called out 2 foot on center walls in non-bearing conditions, and also interior wall sections were supposed to be block corners. So I counted up in that house, the savings on that house and how many studs we pulled out. Just on the centers, we pulled out a ton of studs, okay? That was over $300 in studs. And on 16-inch on centers, there was 113. Going back to 2 on the interior non-bearing walls, produced only 75. And then they had all the studs. I have tons of pictures in the time frame we have. I can't show them all to you, but all the intersections were old school intersections. That produced a whole bunch more studs. So in the end, it was $1,200 a house because the framer was framing his style and nobody caught on to it. So what I want to get into with Dave is what we've been working on is really dictating and teaching not only the framers, but our field team how to do this. So in the end, Dave's also got a database. This system will do the estimate based off what we tell it to do, then dump into a database. And as I looked at the list, a lot of you folks are on a software system. We can dovetail and dump that right into the database and then send it out for comp analysis to multiple lumber vendors. And real quickly, bid out 3 or 4 lumber vendors and then start negotiating on piece by piece and finding even more money. So with that, I'm just setting the table there to show you how much money is on the table by trying a little bit, and then I'll turn it over to Dave.
Perfect, thanks, Ed.
So while we're switching over, now Dave has control, and what Dave was doing last week is we were coming up not only with the estimate, but also wall assemblies on how we want things to do, and pretty much deciding with cost in mind how we want to do the walls.
Can you guys see my screen okay?
You're good, Dave.
Good. So what we did is we went through, like I said, we use Plan Swift for all of our estimating here at BIMaire. But what we did is we went through and started designing out different wall sections, maximizing to 16 feet, and then working down from that 16 foot. to make sure that this was spot on, we actually took the time to draw out each wall independently so that we could verify all of our counts. What that allowed us to do is to start to create a book that says I can use a 16-foot wall section, 16 on center, for any wall that's between 14, 9 5/8 to 16 feet. And then it goes through and lets me know how many studs do I need to build one instance of that wall type. What do I need for my bottom plate? What do I need for my top plate? And what sheet count do I need for my OSB on my exterior walls? We went through, and you'll notice if we scroll down just a little bit, the next one is kind of an odd size. It's 14, 9.5. That's the maximized width or length that we can get out of that wall, where all of my studs stay evenly spaced. So we went through that process for that wall type and kept working through each increment, dropping out one stud at a time to determine what's that maximum wall that I can get from that particular section. So with all those wall types, we can go in. This is actually a customer that Ed and I are working with together right now. And we went into this single family home. And first thing that my team does is they go around and pull dimensions on every single wall for me. I want to know exactly what my lineal is on every wall. We always start at the corners. So on this left side, we came off of this back corner and found that we could maximize with a 16-foot section immediately coming off the corner. Then we go to the front and do the same thing. Again, we always want to try to go with the maximum lengths off of the corners and then fill in between. We wind up on this particular home, we found that once this 16-foot section ends, we can use a 12-foot section right here that'll keep me at least 2 feet away from that window on each side. We want to make sure that we have plenty of wall at each side of the opening. So the guys go through and start to reconfigure those measurements for me to make sure that I'm steering clear of windows and not going to run into any problems trying to join those panels together. So they did a 12-foot, and then we came and we wound up with what's left. What's left is 10 feet, 3 1/4 inches is what we need for that last section of wall to be able to frame up that entire left side of the house. So they go through the entire home for me and lay out all those dimensions, first working on the exterior walls. And once they have all those in for me, then they're going to come into the interiors and do the same thing and give me a dimension of each wall. As they're laying those out, they're again looking to maximize walls. So when we come into something like this T section right here, then they're going to give me one full length wall that dies into this wall right here so that I'm maximizing my framing on both walls and then giving me my intersection in between. Let me turn some of this on so you guys can see it.
And Dave, you're also dictating in this scenario the on centers, intersections, single top plate, double top plate, and all that stuff. And you told me at last count you were almost 900 different wall assemblies or something like that.
We have in total for every wall type that we've built to date, we have a little, I think it's about 981 walls right now. And that changes. I'm actually adding some more today as well from a unique experience that we ran into and need to create another type of wall to be able to make sure that we can manage that wall. So once my guys have set out the walls, then we're going to come around and we actually start counting the walls. I need to know how many 16-foot exteriors do I have. I need to know how many 24 on center interior by size I have. Do I have any 12 on centers on my interiors? I need to go through and quantify all those so that our material manager knows what to do to produce the material list for us. In addition to the walls themselves, we're also looking for our corners. So we have quite a few different corner types that we've built out depending on application. Some of the applications vary because there's different studs that we need to use for different corner types, as well as there are market specifics. There's some markets that won't let me get away with a traditional 3-stud corner. So we needed to create the additional corner styles to make sure that we could fit into the market. So for each corner as well, we've designed out what that corner looks like, including color coding them, because something we run into a lot. This is a pretty standard 3-stud corner that we're looking at. But the reality is, in a 3-stud corner, I actually only need 1 additional stud. We have a lot of clients that we've worked with that automatically add 3 studs to every corner for a 3-stud corner. But because I've maximized my framing already, I know that these 2 purple studs are actually included in my walls, and I don't need to account for them in my corners. So in our tool, when we click a 3-stud corner, we're actually only getting 1 additional stud.
So again, we're controlling how the framer should be framing in this house, not letting them decide.
Correct. Yep. So that's a good point. One thing that we really focus on at BIMaire is typically when we talk about waste, people are talking about what winds up in a dumpster, or what's just laying out on the ground when the house is done. BIMaire looks beyond that and says, really, the bulk of the waste isn't even necessarily going into the dumpster. It's actually going into the home, but it wasn't needed. We didn't need all these additional studs. We often run into that on our site visits, where we'll see a wall with a little, 1010 high glass window, and I'll have 8 studs sitting around that thing. Absolutely no reason to have it. And even though the material was used, it really is still waste, because there was no reason for us to have that sort of additional studs. So my guys go through, they'll assign the proper corner type based on application, as well as market specific standards, to make sure that they're getting the right amount of additional studs counted in for each corner or wall intersection. Then they're also going to go back into the plan. And now we're going to start hitting our openings. So for each opening, we need to size out what our headers are going to be and make sure that we get those accounted for in the database, as well as any additional studs that are required for the windows. That's a critical one also. The kind of normal industry standard is if you're going to count a window, you're going to do your 2-ply header, and then you're going to throw on 2 additional studs. We don't like to do it that way. I want my guys to actually look at this 10-foot, 3¼ wall, determine where my studs are lining in that wall already, so that we can get an actual count of how many additional studs am I going to need to make that opening. So they do that for every door and window as they go. And we're working on actually this afternoon the ability to create the detail off of that, so that any wall with an opening has an additional detail that shows you how to frame that specific opening. So once they get through the walls, another fun thing that we have going on is everybody is always wanting to understand what's going on in their roof. In looking at the attendee sheet, we have a lot of people that do rafters and joists. Piece of cake, we love that. It's very easy to solve. And when we do, we return it with an image so that you know what pieces were being used in what areas in that roof. Where this becomes challenging is for those of you that are in a truss market instead, you've probably realized that your truss manufacturer really likes to hold that data close to them. They're very protective over what they can do in the truss field. So we developed a tool working with the truss manufacturer to be able to get rough budgets for trusses. This isn't something you can create a PO with because all we're trying to do is figure out approximately how much lumber do you need, approximately how many pounds of plate are you going to need to build those trusses. But it does allow the opportunity during the product development stage to kind of get that gut check and figure out if you're on the right path with your roof system before you've ever allowed a manufacturer to take a look at it and do the design for you.
So Dave, two quick comments. One, on the stick frame, what we find a lot is we see the pretty picture, but there's no detail. We haven't gone into detail and tell the framer how to do it, tell the lumber yard how we want to do it. And this is where, if you don't have the talent in-house to do this, this is where Dave comes along and helps figures this stuff out. We just talked about the trusses. We talked about this with this builder, this particular builder a week or so ago. The trusses, you allow the truss rep to decide how you're doing things. Right now, there's a whole lot more board footage in a girder truss than there is in a parallam. So some of these cost comparisons are coming up now that didn't really matter to us before. Because if you got a triple girder truss and that's what they're putting in, then you might be paying more than the simple parallam to carry it. You got to decide what this is. Again, we want you guys to start figuring out how to take control and ask the question why. So anyway, that was it, Dave. That's my comment.
You're good. So to dovetail off of that, one thing that we do like to do, I'm in Utah where everybody frames 24 ounce centers on interior walls. That's just how we do things in Utah. We deal with a lot of customers in other states that are still doing a lot of 16 ounce centers for interior walls. The beauty behind a material manager system is that I can trace a wall one time, or I can assign a section to it one time as what you're currently doing on a 16 ounce center. And then we can very quickly, with just one button click, be able to compare what happens if we go to a 24 ounce center instead, so that we can see what's the real delta. How many studs are we losing in that process? And if your pricing is integrated into the system, then we can also see an actual cost comparison in virtually real time in that process. So ultimately what we're after is data. So I want to show a couple of different versions here. I'm gonna have to scroll out just a little bit so you can get a full picture. This is a very specific upload sheet. This goes into an ERP system directly, and we supply these to that customer. All of this information is auto-generated. As PlanSwift is doing its thing, once we export from PlanSwift into this workbook, it formats everything into a usable way for this particular ERP system. So it fills out every single cell that's required in order for it to be uploaded, so that no one has to take our estimate and then plug it into the system. That's where we find the biggest problems happen, is if we're doing an estimate and keying things into a system, we're going to run a really high risk of somebody fat fingering something, and instead of getting 10 studs, you're getting 100 studs because we hit a number in extra time. So we wanted to eliminate that by auto building these sheets, so that what we're giving back to you is something that you can immediately use in your system.
So Dave, you're taking the estimate based on how you want the house to be built, dictating the framing technique. It's then being downloaded into the database. This database then goes into an integrated system. You don't have to create the database. We're going to use your database. Then you have the database for house type A, house type B, house type C. Then you can export this list of this bill of materials to lumber companies to bid on per piece and then do a comp analysis.
Yep, correct. And we have, so on top of having our own database, we also manage databases for a lot of other builders. And that's a very easy process. So if you're already in an ERP system, you already have part numbers, you already have part descriptions, we're not going to ask you to use ours. What we're going to do is create an index to say, my part X is your part Y, so that you can still continue to use the data that you've spent the time and money creating. If you aren't currently in an ERP system, then we absolutely have a database that we can get over to you so that you can use part numbers and part descriptions and all the pertinent data that have already been created for you.
So Dave, I looked at the list again this morning. I know a bunch of you folks, the smaller volume builders that are on the seminar, that have a database that, or a system that works for you but doesn't have a true database. You can actually take this database that Dave has here, turn it into a bid list, get rid of some of the columns that don't need it, simplify it, and send each one out. Lock the thing up, and usually use this as a bid sheet for a house. Because right now, what some of you folks are doing are sending up that plan out, 2,200 square. So I just did this for another builder, 2,800 square foot house. It was a $45,000 lumber package that is being managed by the lumber company or the framer. So in a $40,000 to $45,000 package, Dave and I both agree that we're finding anywhere from $3,000 to $5,000 in savings by controlling that package. Correct, Dave?
Yes, sir.
So we got about 12 minutes left. You want to tell a little about the complete estimate while we have some time? What I want to do is I want to leave enough time for anybody to raise their hand, talk and start to leave some dialogue at the end of the session. So this system with Dave, what we're doing with Dave is we just did with another builder. We were in product development stage, and we took everything from footing to the building envelope down to drywall and got some initial costs very early on. And then Dave can actually take it to the finish line, literally, to the final. So tell us a little bit about how that whole process works, Dave.
Yeah. So in all, today, BIMaire has a little over 18,000 assemblies that we've built that cover everything from excavation all the way through to final clean. We have different levels of what that looks like. We find that a lot of times in the UPM world, there's some differences in opinion on how to do things. So drywall is a great example. We have customers that ask for something as simple as how many square feet of drywall do I need? Versus we have customers that we provide sheet counts by size. How many rolls of tape do you need? How much mud do you need? How many boxes of screws do you need? How many corner pieces do you need? And within every category, we have those different levels that we can drill into. Ultimately, the goal in UPM should be to get into the micro data, but sometimes we need to do that in steps. UPM can be a little shocking to trade partners at times. So sometimes it is necessary for us to kind of dip our toes in the water and introduce a less detailed version to kind of get them warmed up to the idea and moving along, knowing that ultimately we do want to get to that ultimate prize of controlling every single individual part and piece. We have every vertical cost code accounted for through our customers across the country. We feel like that 18,000 number is pretty close to the final number. We will have to add some things here and there as we run into something new, but we've gotten a pretty good view across the country of what all that we need. So we offer our services in different levels. We have some people that want the entire house start to finish. We have other guys that target cost codes and say, I can't handle converting 100% to UPM today, but here's my 5 biggest headaches. Can you guys get us going on the 5 biggest ones that we have? Ultimately, our goal is we don't want to be your estimator forever. For our customers, our goal is to get you started in the process by giving you that horsepower to get up and running. But long term, what we want to be able to do is get you trained so that you have somebody in-house that can produce the exact same level, the same quality on the same type of timelines that you can control in-house. And we do that by having you identify who those people are going to be and getting those folks trained up and ready to go so that they can hit the ground running as well.
So Dave.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
So we have worked very close with Chuck over the past few years, going through his estimating book to make sure that that we're following those best practices and the tools that we offer to people to make sure that it aligns. The last thing we want is to provide you something that goes against what you're going to hear in seminars and webinars and from Chuck personally. So we've spent a lot of time going through that to make sure that that we're following the same lessons you're learning as you go through the different education series.
So what David, I've been doing this for the last few months. This is not just a large volume builder kind of a thing. We got a couple builders on the call right now that, you know, are 20 to 30 homes per year and getting ready to grow. We're starting out with Dave's team running the estimate, and then we're going to transition over to Dave's point to them being able to run the estimate. And Dave promises me he can teach me how to do it. So if he can teach me how to do it, I think he can teach you how to do it. My background is the old school way, you know, of literally, you know, the old school pencil and paper. And I took Chuck's book years ago and then start putting some automation into Excel doing that. But what Dave and the BIMaire team have done is automated this. So if you were to buy an estimating software system, you got to build your database. And every time I talk to David, the number goes up, you know, on how many wall assemblies he has. And it's crazy. So one thing I just want to make sure of, it's not just for small volume. Larger volume builders can do it. You can buy the seat license. And Rick Mallard of our other consultants, he and I are getting trained on this to be able to use this. So if we can use it, you can train somebody in your operation. So my thing, Dave and I both believe between a $40,000 and $45,000 lumber package, when you're letting somebody else control it, I can get that cost down for $3,000 to $5,000 easily. I just showed you what happens when you don't use, when you let the framer decide. That was almost $2,000 on little tiny details. And what Dave's talking about doing is showing the details and then teaching the framer and your superintendents. You guys are dropping $45,000 on the ground and nobody's counting it. Nobody's deciding what's in it. Nobody knows. Who would throw 45 grand on the ground and not worry about it? That's in effect what we're doing. Dave, we got only a couple minutes left. I want to make sure we leave some time. How much time does it take to do like a 2,500 square foot house? Complete.
To do a full estimate, we typically see about 2,500 square feet, usually about a dozen structural options, and an average of 4 elevations. Total time, start to finish, actual man time is averages about 16 to 22 hours to do one of those plans.
That's a master set, by the way, everybody.
Yes,
So you guys are spending, see if that's that size house, let's say your bricks and sticks are $200,000. We both, Dave and I both think we have 3 to 5% going to unitized pricing. So think about it. You spend 2 days and estimate a master set of plans. I got 3 to 5% savings on the table and transparency as I go through the rest of the year through the operation and all your plan sets. And the one thing Chuck always preaches, and you saw in my early slide, times that by how many homes a year you're doing. That one little house that I walked, that house was walked last year before we got shut down for COVID. That's how many studs we found in one little house. And times that by how many houses you're doing. And to Dave's point, this is all following the preachings of Chuck and Emma for over the last however many years. So anyway, we're pretty close to getting to that 45-minute mark. Dave, anything else you want to add or wrap up with, and we'll open to questions and answers. And by the way, Emma Jane can run that. You can either type your question in, or I don't know if we can unmute and talk. That's up to Emma Jane. So Dave, anything else in closing you want to talk about?
Yeah, so to cap on what Ed said, that 3 to 5% is definitely the number that Ed and I agree to. One thing I do always like to point out is if I'm saying 3 to 5%, I'm saying that to a builder that pretty much has a good thing going on already. That's the low-hanging fruit at that point. At BIMaire, in my 3.5 years, the highest we've seen is 12%. That was a builder that really was just kind of the Wild West and how things went on. But I would definitely invite you that if you're interested to take a look at that, get with us, because we can look at your plans, have a conversation about what you're doing today, and get a pretty good gut feeling quickly of what you'd actually likely be seeing in potential savings by switching over to the UPM method. The other thing I always like to touch on is, a lot of you guys have probably heard UPM said over and over again, or unitized purchasing. 5 years ago, it had a pretty bad name. It was definitely a swear word to a lot of people. Slowly over the past few years, it's really taken hold. And what we're seeing now is we work with a lot of the national guys that are making that switch as well. So the reality is UPM is going to become the norm. We used to say in the next 3 to 5 years. Now I say in the next 1 to 3 years. And with the way that the market is right now, we're actually seeing that accelerate a little bit more. Where I would strongly suggest to anyone, if you're not currently on UPM, now is the time to strongly consider it to make sure that you can stay the builder of choice in your market.
So Dave, the other thing you referenced is number one, when the one builder I'm working with right now, we went through, and as we were going through, we were resizing and old school kind of value engineering, coming up with some better ideas on how to do things to lower cost. Dave's right on some of the builders that are doing complete bid management. It's a lot of money, and that 3 to 5% is somebody who's already doing a good job with unitized pricing. On the unitized pricing, to the trade part of this, is it's not a big deal to the trades. I'm not trying to take money out of the trade's pocket, by the way. I'm trying to get transparency. When I first started doing this with Chuck, I don't know, about 8 years ago, one of the first things I did when we both hit the ground on a job, I think it was Texas, as we went dumpster diving. Well, the amount of waste that we see on sites when we're on sites is staggering. We just did an in-house seminar for builders last week. We had this thing called the walk of shame, and it's the unbelievable waste we see on job sites. What Dave's talking about doing is having the database. In my old world, and I did it by hand, and I would tell the siding guy 40 squares, he would tell me 50 squares, reality is 45. Dave has all not only the area, but also the waste factor that we're getting from manufacturers to figure this out, and then start to hold the trades accountable. What we're talking about is there's somewhere about 35 trades that take to build a house, depending on your market. We're just getting transparency with all the trades. So I'm just looking here if anybody has questions. Emma Jane, I don't know if people want to raise their hand.
We do have a question from RJ. I think this is for Dave. With the builders you're currently working with, how many plans or elevations do they sell, and what level of customability do they offer?
So that's a very wide range for us. We have builders with as few as a dozen plans, and we have builders with as many as 150 plans in their library. We typically see a pretty good correlation on complexity of those plans on those numbers. I wish I could say that my 150 plan customer only had 5 structural options and 3 elevations. They don't. They average, I believe it's about 16 elevations per plan, and usually right around 60 to 70 structural options per plan. So we have a wide range, and we built our teams here internally to be able to handle those different ranges. So we have teams that specialize in the big boy, really complex houses that are going to take a lot more time and effort to get through versus the guys that'll handle the more true production style with a smaller library, significantly reduced option and elevation offerings.
So Dave, I have known RJ and his operation. They're a very, very good company. Been part of our builder group forever. Right now they have their product line is probably fairly easy to manage, but they do customize. So they'll have a product line and then customize. You won't let RJ know if he had the estimate done, how easy it is to change when you customize?
Yeah, so the beauty of the digitizer that we use, PlanSwift, is once we estimate a master set, if somebody does some customization to their home, we'll actually take that new drawing and overlay it into PlanSwift, so that all we have to do, we don't need to retrace the house, we don't need to re-estimate anything. We just need to go and move our click points to match that customized portion of the home, and then export it, and now you have a estimate specifically for that instance to catch that custom option. Much quicker, faster way of doing things, and that's something that our customers that do customs, we train their people in-house how to go through that process, but we also have customers that we do their customs for them, and we'll take it and make those modifications to catch the custom. It's part of the beauty of UPM is we don't need to send anything out to bid on a custom. We have those unitized pricing, so all I'm trying to solve is what is my delta from your master set to that custom option, so that you know how much that custom option is going to cost you.
So
Hey, Dave,
RJ, tell Rod you need the software. Sorry, Chuck, was that you?
Oh, that was me. I don't know if you can hear me or not, but
Yes, we can hear you.
one of the things with the unit pricing that is, it's not just for the big boys. When I was building 10 houses a year, I was all unit pricing. Not only for the material, but also for the labor. And it allows me to streamline my database. So I don't embed pricing necessarily in every one of my houses. I have my pricing by vendor. So I can switch a vendor almost instantaneously and come up with new purchase orders. It is so much easier to manage your database by doing unit pricing. I don't know why builders don't do it. They think people look at it and they say, I don't need all that detail. Yes, you do. And that detail makes it easier to manage the whole process. So I don't know if you want to talk about that or not. But.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of started to talk about a little bit earlier that it's not just for the bigs anymore. To Chuck's point, the unitized pricing, even for the small builders, we got a couple of you folks there that are either semi-custom or full-blown custom. What I want Dave to teach me is how to use this, so when I do my next custom house, that I can do it. The other thing Chuck just mentioned, the labor side. One of the folks on the call is Tony McLaughlin from Davis Homes. This isn't planned, by the way. Dave and I kind of talked about this a little bit yesterday. We had this couple slides up front, and this is just how we've been working. So Tony, do me a favor, unmute yourself. Let them know, using this and getting more transparency, how much you were able to save on a framer. Sorry,
Well, I
Tony,
tell you,
for picking on you last minute, but it's too good of a story to not to tell everybody.
right, exactly. So, we had a framer that kind of controlled our all of our builds in-house, and his pricing had really gone to the wayside, and we were trying to figure out how do we get better control on not only our framing packages, but also on our labor prices to do it. So by us really diving into the lumber side of it and figuring out, the best way to frame it, we were actually able to go to other framers and tell them kind of our story and where we needed to be at, and was able to supplement our complete framing strategy with savings, anywhere from 45 cents a square foot to $1 a square foot, depending on the complexity of our plans. And that was added on top of the lumber savings that we identified just through this process.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. I mean, it wasn't really hard to do. And to Tony's point, we need the transparency to go back to the framers and have some negotiating strategy. One of the other things that Dave had mentioned is product line. One of the major sins of most builders is carrying too much product. And what happens is because they have too much product, they end up just doing bid management. And Tony and I are kind of battling that in his operation a little bit. But we found out in Tony's world, I don't know, 5 or 7 plans are about 80% of their sales. So even though our back office is so busy, this software gives us the opportunity to get control, get the transparency, and be able to drive those numbers. So, and we're still pretty early on with Tony and his team getting through this, but we're already starting to see the savings. Like I said, I can't control what the lumber's market's doing, but I still can control how I use it and the rest of the operation. I've got to start, counteracting that. We got price increases coming out of some all directions. So Emma Jane, do we have any other questions or?
You do. We have a question from Tyler. Could you speak into the best ways to implement this level of framing detail in the field? Is it common to have framing plans? What about accountability? And do you recommend back charging the framers? And then we have one more question from RJ after that.
Okay, so I'd recommend framing details, absolutely. So here's what we do. We drop 45 grand on the ground. Don't tell anybody how to use it. So what we recommend is, what Dave's been doing is creating the details. And to your question about accountability, do I want to drive the accountability? Yes. In a very tight framing market, I don't want to hit them up the first time and start back charging. What we've done in the past is we also recommend, if you do the takeoff, share the takeoff, how it's done with the framer, how you came about that, how you want those details done. I also have to educate your superintendents, because in a lot of cases, what we've done as we got busier is we went to bid management, and the supers really need to be trained as well. I needed 2 of them to start looking. So I'll probably walk a house. Did this with a builder in Birmingham a few years ago. We actually met with the framer, and when I just showed you on that one little window detail with 4 studs, in a window, we taught them how much easier it was to frame it our way. And at some point, I will start driving to the accountability. What'll happen is, if you've heard Chuck and Emma and some of our other seminars before, we start talking about the variances. How we found those framing irregularities were by the variance report, that they were always over per house. Until we walked them, nobody figured out why. This is what we were called for. This is what happened. At some point, I'm going to have that harsh conversation with the framer. I don't really like back charge. We talk about this a lot. I'd rather teach them how to use it and then start to drive the accountability. At some point, I'm going to have a conversation with the framer that he's more expensive as a total cost. He's more expensive than another framer. In some cases, another framer might be slightly more. And what Tony just taught you was how much we were able to drive the accountability, with the framer and drive the price down. So it's a combination. The last thing on that, what I'll tell you to do is don't just give a lumber list to a lumber company. I really like to tell the lumber company how I want it packaged. I can get it packaged. So think about it. The estimate starts with a sill plate. What's on the bottom of the lumber load? The sill plate. So I want to deliver the lumber so the framer can use it. I want it by package by package. I'm a full basement. So first floor deck is done. First floor walls is packaged. Headers are cut and packaged. I really want to organize that lumber load so I can start to manage to zero defects and zero variances. So RJ, what's RJ's question?
RJ wants to know what software you integrate with.
For ERPs,
I believe that's the
we-
question.
we have Mark Systems, New Star, JD Edwards Enterprise One, and Coba or Sapphire Solutions, who we currently have the system built out for.
So RJ, I believe that's not one of your softwares, as I recall. But in some cases, you know, especially on the lumber side, you can start creating your own database to do something with it.
Yeah, and
Later up.
so as
Go ahead,
long
Dave.
as any software company that uses a Excel upload sheet, which is the vast majority of ERPs, even if we don't have it today, we could certainly create the ability to do that.
And
Any more
that's,
questions, Evan Jane?
that's all we
So
have
RJ,
for questions.
If you and Rod want to chat about it later on, just text me and we can talk. I saw the list of everybody else on there. You know, feel free to reach out to us. Dave's been doing this. I can't believe some of the data we're pulling out for you folks up north. I mean, the foundation detail alone on a full foundation, 9-foot wall of stone, you know, how much concrete's going into it is going to be your first thing you're going to see. What we're doing on a couple of those builders, we're concentrating on the building envelope first and then start working towards the end. So if you need any help from us, you know, feel free to reach out. Dave, any last closing thoughts?
No, just if you're currently not UPM, again, I'd strongly suggest you look at it. And I think that the one thing we always like to lead people with, Ed touched on it a little bit earlier, we know that we can teach this to anyone. We typically, if I hired a new estimator today, I typically hire people without construction experience because they don't have bad habits. And we can teach them to be a highly sophisticated estimator in 80 hours or less. It's a system that we use the experience of the construction folks to build it, and so that we could have anyone able to use that system by just answering questions as you work through it.
And
Yeah, I'd like to make
He's
one little
promised
comment.
me.
If you go to the unit database or unit pricing, it makes your negotiations and your with your trades and with your suppliers so much easier, as opposed to giving them 100 different plans. You negotiate on the units, and it's one negotiation. It's not 20, 30, 40, 100 different plans that you're sitting there trying to go through when you're doing the bid management process. Your bid management is bidding the units, not the individual houses. The turnaround for purchase orders is just instantaneous when you start doing this. So it streamlines the whole back office by going to unit pricing.
Can't agree more, Chuck. I mean, my old world, we're almost all unitized pricing, and POs, house release to PO release was less than a day.
Yeah, it makes it so much easier.
So if you need us, I mean, I think you got everybody on the call knows us. If you need Dave's services, just let us know. Like I said, he and I have been working together for a few months, making a lot of ground, a lot of headway really fast. And Tony, thanks for piping in. I know that wasn't planned, but thank you for joining in. And if there's no other questions, Emma Jane, I think we're pretty good.
there are no other questions. I did send in the Q&A bubble. I responded to Tony's question. He was wondering if we could send out contact information. So I did type that in. I typed in Dave's, email address and Ed's email address, so if you need to contact them. You'll also be receiving an email from me tomorrow, basically just thanking you for coming to the event today, and it'll have both Dave's and Ed's email address in there. Make sure you let Dave know that you were part of the webinar so he knows that how you got to him. So yeah, if you have any other questions, feel free to contact us directly. Remember that we have all kinds of services here to help you, ranging from rebates through our builder partnerships program, all the way to training, consulting, and builder groups. We also offer surveys. We're coming up due for our Builder of Choice Award. That is going to be, we're accepting applications to be given the Builder Partners or the Builder of Choice Award, which is a very prestigious award. We have a few people actually who are in the webinar who have received the Builder of Choice Award, and they do wear that. They have the plaque up in their office, and they have Winsong actually took the logo and put it on some of their jackets to show that they were Builder of Choice. It's a very good way to get in with your trades. And we also have our Managing for Profit seminar that is coming up in February here in Denver. That is getting close to sold out. So if you're looking to join our Managing for Profit, we haven't had Managing for Profit since 2019 because we had everything canceled last year. We weren't able to run it. So make sure you get signed up for that. We have Superintendent's Job in Atlanta in March. So make sure you sign up for that. Of course, we have Webinar Wednesday coming up again in 2 weeks. Chuck is going to be doing a presentation going over the Roaring 20s and talking about his predictions for this year. He's got a couple of great insights that you'll want to make sure you're paying attention to for that. The registration for that will be up on our website probably before the end of this week. So make sure you sign up for that. And if you need anything, there's Ed's information. You can contact Ed about any of the information we talked to you about today, and he can put you directly in touch with Dave. With that, I want to thank all of you for coming and joining us today. We enjoy having you every couple weeks for our Webinar Wednesdays, and we are booked out through March. So we have stuff scheduled in March for you as well. So keep an eye on our website for all of those details. Have a great day, and we will see you in 2 weeks. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Dave. Thanks, Tony.
Hey, thanks, Ed.